This is Naomi Wolf on October 29th, 2008, and we're here with the first installment of American Revolution Broadcasting, where we're going to be giving you real updates in this time of crisis about what real American heroes are doing to stand up for liberty and the Constitution while they're under threat, and the real news that the mainstream media is often overlooking about these issues. So today I've got a true American patriot fighting for freedom in a very profound way. He's risking a lot of things in his own life, and his friends, who are also standing up for freedom, have suffered actually physically, and he's here to tell us about it. Matthis Chiroux. Welcome, Matthis.
Thank you, Naomi.
Please tell me the story of what happened to you and your friends in your group, Iraq Veterans Against the War, when you went to the presidential debate.
Right. Well, myself and Chris Goldsmith, we organized an action surrounding the final presidential debate between Obama and McCain.
Right.
We made our intentions clear. We made demands to the debate moderator, Bob Schieffer, 1 week before, and we made both campaigns aware, as well a number of people in Congress and the media aware, that as a result of the campaign's lack of coverage of veterans' issues and the war in Iraq, that Iraq Veterans Against the War was demanding that 2 of our members be allowed into the debate to ask 1 question of each candidate.
Seems like a reasonable exercise of your First Amendment rights. Then what happened?
Well, the day before the actual action, we met with Detective Calvert and a Detective Anisi, who identified themselves as Nassau County Police Department, and said they were in charge of the security for the debate. And they wanted to touch base with us because they heard about our actions, and they didn't think that the candidates and Bob Schieffer were going to let us in, and wanted to touch base about what we were doing. And we expressed to these guys very explicitly, we have completely nonviolent intentions and really reconciliatory intentions. We're out here to press the issue that veterans and service members are not being heard from or are not being cared for.
Quickly, what kind of issues did you feel the candidates in the campaign are not addressing in terms of these brave men and women who put their lives on the line for us?
Well, the 2 questions we were going to ask, Chris was going to ask McCain about his abysmal voting record as far as voting to expand funding for the Veterans Administration, which is badly underfunded in the face of a mounting number of casualties coming back from Iraq.
He voted against more funding?
In 2004 and 2005,
really?
In 2006 and 2007.
Really?
John McCain has actually rated his voting record as far as veterans issues. He's rated a D- by the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America.
I had no idea. And what was your second question?
My question to Barack Obama was going to be, sir, you've expressed sentiments in the past that the war and occupation of Iraq is illegal. If this is so, then it is not only the right of service members such as myself to refuse participation, it is our responsibility according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So sir, as
and just
President...
to clarify, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sir, as President, would you be willing to back up those expressed sentiments by supporting soldiers who would thus be required not to go to Iraq?
I love the question. It's a very, what I love about this question is that it's citizens looking at the law and citizens looking at the Constitution and citizens, challenging the legality of what the nation has done in their name or what the leadership has done in their name. So it seems like you guys were very responsible in terms of alerting the authorities. It seems like you actually bent over backwards to let people know what your intentions were. And then what happened?
Night of the action came. I had hope right up until the last minute. I really thought that the candidates were going to do the right thing and realize that it is right that we hear from our veterans. And 7 p.m. came, our deadline came, and myself and a formation of Iraq Veterans Against the War.
How many?
There was 14 of us total, I believe. We marched to the front gates of Hofstra.
Right.
Where we stopped and we read our questions, and then as we had told the cops we were planning on doing, we marched across the street in columns of 2 into police lines. Myself and Christopher Goldsmith, as well as 6 others, were immediately arrested. We were taken behind police lines, handcuffed, and put on a bus. In the meantime, the other peaceful demonstrators who was assembled with us, in keeping with the First Amendment rights, when they began chanting cheers of support for the veterans and well, the police responded by riding their horses out from behind police lines and into the crowd, effectively pushing them back across the street. And you know, as
these were nonviolent protesters.
These were nonviolent protesters. At no time did any member of our demonstration ever become violent. Right. The only violence that was experienced on this evening was from the police towards the protesters and the veterans. Right. And yeah, so they actually used these horses to push this crowd of people back across Hempstead Turnpike, which I believe is completely illegal, and I think the ACLU they're doing a lot of investigation right now into the use of horses and what.
How many horses?
I would have to say, you know, anywhere from 10 to 20.
Oh my goodness!
It's hard
I
to say.
thought it was one or two.
No, there was a large number of horses. It was a line of animals coming towards the crowd and literally pushing them back. It was terrifying. I was already behind it, but watching it, it certainly didn't remind me of something that I'd see in the U.S. It reminded me of something I'd see in Afghanistan or Iraq. But you know,
were people fleeing, or were they? I mean, how do you react on horses?
Well, people were moving backwards. They were trying to comply. The police were telling them, "Back up, get on the sidewalks," and they were complying with that. I mean, they were you know, not happy about having to comply with that. You know, there was people shouting at the cops. You know, there was one of my favorite chants that I heard in the videos afterwards is one guy was yelling at the cops, "Stop using animals to do your job." and so, you know, but they pushed him back, and the demonstrators complied peacefully. They moved back onto the sidewalk.
Then what?
And then as they were on the sidewalks, the police came in and began, as best as I can tell from what I saw, you know, through the bus window. The bus was parked parallel to all of this, and from the videos that I've seen afterwards, which there's tons and tons of video evidence of what happened, is the police, after they're on the sidewalk, literally started grabbing people off the sidewalk. And when they did this, the police line literally like grabbed Nick and my friends and pulled them to the ground. And they were actually clubbing. There's video of police officers clubbing like grannies for peace, like and knocking them back with their clubs. And as a result of this clubbing and this pulling, this whole mass of protesters was thrown to the ground. At the same time that the cops threw these people to the ground, one of these officers on horseback, an Officer Quagliano, actually charged his horse up onto the sidewalk behind these people. And subsequently, when they were pulled to the ground by the police, Nick Morgan and several others fell into the path of this horse who was spinning circles on the sidewalk, and he was nearly killed when his head was stepped on by Officer Quagliano and his horse, and his lower orbital was shattered. Nick had surgery last Thursday. He's recovering. He had to get a titanium plate put in his face, literally, for his eye to sit on to keep his eye from sinking. It's full reconstructive surgery. They really brutalized. They could have killed him if had that hoof hit a few inches higher on his head. Nick Morgan would not be the same person today that he was the day before that demonstration.
Well, it sounds like he isn't the same person he was.
Well, mentally, I mean,
I
mean, Nick. You know, I've spoken with Nick almost every day since this happened, and mentally he's all there, and he's sharp, and he's motivated to get better and to get this issue out there. Because the fact of the matter is, while both of the mainstream candidates were fighting over Joe the plumber's vote in this final debate, Nick the vet was outside getting his head crushed,
trampled by,
and then getting ignored by the media.
So let me just get this straight, because as an American, I'm so shocked by the sequence of events, although by now I shouldn't be, that I'm finding it hard to kind of wrap my brain around this. Your friend Nick served our country, fighting for freedom overseas, risking his life. Then he comes back, and with a group of other veterans who are being, their organizations being underfunded, their issues are not being addressed, he and other citizens try to exercise their First Amendment rights and assemble. And the Constitution gives us the right peaceably to assemble for a redress of grievances, which is exactly what you guys were talking about, a redress of grievances. At that point, the police forces are deployed to arrest you guys, and then the way you've described it, one of these police officers rode his mount into the crowd and trampled citizens who'd been beaten down onto the sidewalk.
And Iraq veterans, ma'am, yes.
And Iraq veterans. And some of these were, you know, strong young men and women, and some of them were elderly people, some of them were people not in such good health.
One woman stepped on a very good friend of mine. Her name is Nadine Lupka. She's a kindergarten teacher. You know, this was not a wild crowd of anti-authoritarian protesters.
Crazy-eyed armed anarchists. These
right.
were ordinary Americans.
This was a protest by and large of citizens of Nassau County and of the greater New York and mid-Atlantic area.
Does that seem like a fair way for your nation to receive these vets with their questions and their concerns?
I'm horrified and appalled by what I witnessed and what I experienced, both in the arrest process and then in the actual detainment.
Tell me more about what happened. You told me earlier that Nick had some trouble getting
well,
medical care.
after Nick was stepped on the sidewalk, and remember, the cops came on the sidewalk and did this to these demonstrators and veterans while they were while they were in compliance with their orders.
Right.
After Nick was trampled and the rest were trampled as well, him and Jeff Millard, another one of our members, were actually pulled off the sidewalk and arrested. Nick, after being stepped on...
While he was wounded, after he was wounded.
Yeah, this is the crazy thing. Immediately after people started getting stepped on, our members started trying to render first aid. I mean, many of our members are combat lifesavers, and as soon as Nick was stepped on, one of our members, Jabbar Magruder, who has become a personal hero of mine for the valor that he showed, and literally the seconds following what happened, when he charged more or less underneath this horse to get down on the ground and render first aid to Nick.
Wow,
and another one of our members ran in and put his hands up like this towards Officer Cagliano on the horse and said, "Step back, like you're gonna step on him again." And Jabbar didn't even hesitate. He was just like boom on the ground with him, and he was checking him.
Such courage.
And the cops came and shoot him back. They said, "Get away from him! Get away from him!" And he's like, "He needs help. Like I giving him first aid." And they're like, "Get away from him!" And they got away. And then the cops sat there and looked at him for like at least another 15 seconds and didn't do anything. And then they started jostling him. There's actually videos of these cops reaching down. Anybody who's been through any type of basic first aid course knows that if you suspect somebody of having a head injury or a neck injury, you don't move them. Right. You don't jostle them. And these cops jostled him, they twisted him, they rolled him over, they drug him off the sidewalk. He had huge bruises across his rib cage and his stomach from where he was drugged from the sidewalk. He was then picked up, handcuffed, walked across the street where they took him to the ambulance. They put a piece of gauze on his face. They brought him on the bus with the rest of us vets.
Standing up, sitting up with his head injury?
Yes.
Not on a stretcher?
Not on a stretcher. Like, they did not want to take him to the hospital. Like, they put him on the bus.
Did someone ask them to give him medical care?
It's crazy because, I mean, yes, as soon as he came on the bus, almost all of the vets who've been through basic first aid looked at Nick and didn't even know he'd been stepped on, didn't know what had happened. We just seen that he has blood coming out of his face and he's got this thing. But we look at him and we go, that man has a concussion. Right. And all of us, like, almost at the same time, started telling these officers, that man has a concussion. He needs to go to the hospital now. He needs immediate medical attention.
And they didn't respond to this?
Well, they responded, all right. They said, well, Nick didn't ask to go to the hospital. And we said, officers, Nick has a concussion. He's disoriented. He doesn't know his name. He doesn't know where he is. He's not responding to us. He cannot speak for himself. Please do the right thing and help my friend, get him the medical attention he needs. Right. And they literally responded by saying, too bad. And Nick sat there for, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes with us on this bus while we were horrified. Nick is one of my dearest friends in this movement. I literally love that boy. And there's not a police line I wouldn't march into with him. I mean, we were battle buddies in Denver. We were right there next to each other the whole way. And to be handcuffed to a bus and witness my friend who, for all I know, could be dying, and not be able to do anything at all, but to sit there and to be asking these officers who are supposedly in control of the situation, and also serving the law, to help him, and they're refusing. It's rare that I felt that horrified before in my life.
It's extraordinary.
It was very traumatic to everybody on that bus.
I'm sure it was very traumatic. I mean, physically for Nick, but psychologically for all these brave men who had risked their lives in other contexts to face this kind of brutality at home.
Well, after about 10 minutes, Nick, we got him to come to. He finally opened his eyes and he looked at one of us. I can't remember who, but he said somebody's name. Right. and we realized Nick's here with us in this moment. Like he's aware.
Right.
And so we just looked at him and started yelling at him. Hey, Nick, buddy, Nick, say I need to go to the hospital. Just say I need to go to the hospital. And he's like, you can tell he's trying to cut through the haze, and he's looking at us, and he finally gets it in his head, and he goes, I need to go to the hospital.